But then we get to the bay parameters. Now it's here in bay parameters that we can control the size of our building, because the building will be controlled by the size of our speed bay and our regular bays. What controls how many buildings get placed are the min and max bays deep and min and max bays wide. So let's take a look at the speed bay depths and bay widths. Right now we have it set to 65 feet, 50, and 50 feet. Let's go ahead and modify some of these values. So let's move this down to 60 feet. We can see how the building got a little bit smaller. If we even make that much smaller, like 50 feet, that building gets even thinner right here. These are the speed bays, the first row of bays. If we make them bigger, move them to 75 feet, you can very easily see how this bay is much larger than the adjacent bay beside it. So let's go ahead and, for the purpose of our session here, let's go ahead and make it 60 feet. Our regular bays are now the remaining bays behind our speed bays. So if I were to make those 60 feet as well, they are now all the same size. If we make them 50 feet, we can see that they're 10 feet smaller. Then as we get to bay width, let's just take a look at our entire building right here. If we make them, let's say 40 feet, see how they shrink. If we make them 65 feet, we can see now how the bays are wider than they are deep. So let's just go ahead and leave that at 55 feet and move on down to the minimum and maximum bays deep. So right now we have it set to 5 minimum and 5 maximum. So right here we can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 5 bays deep. So if we were to lower that number to 4, you can see how the minimum number decreased as well. If we go down to 3, it's now able to place 2 buildings. What's also going to contribute to the number of buildings on the site are things like the ring roads or your dock parameters. So we can also control the depth of these truck stall parking right here that are connected to the buildings. But let's take a look at the minimum and maximum bays wide. Right now its maximum is set to 80. So it'll never create anything more than 80 bays wide. But if we start to decrease this value to something like, let's say 10, you'll notice now it's going to make much, much smaller buildings. So these are 10 bays wide, and each bay is 55 feet. Now, if we're interested in seeing how wide or long or deep these buildings are, we can enable labels. So let's go ahead and turn those on. And let's just turn on building width and building depth. So we can see that the building is 550 feet wide because our bay widths are 55 feet, and we said do not generate more than 10 bays wide. So this is how we can control the number of buildings on our site. And now if we head back up here and say warehouse access change, we may actually be able to get a third building on our site. But again, we have to modify some additional aspects like the dock depth, dock width inset, and so on. And maybe we want to just head all the way down to the bottom here and disable ring roads and those access roads. And we're going to go ahead and insert those manually later on.